Council President Aaron Mutter,
Present.
Council Vice President Bob Weisbord,
Here.
Councilmember Fred Bush,
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Fortner,
Here.
Councilmember Rob McGreevy,
Here.
Councilmember Michelle Panopoulos,
Here.
Councilmember Cindy Rickards,
Here.
Mayor Andrea Deutsch.
Here.
Thank you. I have no comments. Ms. Mayor?
I just want to simply acknowledge we had a very successful election in the borough yesterday. It's nationwide, but in the borough. I just want to congratulate those who were successful. And I want to thank everyone from the candidates to the poll workers to everyone who worked to make democracy happen. It's always heartening to see the effort that goes in to making our government work.
Thank you. Okay, being that this is our work session meeting, we have public comment before we discuss any business. So I will ask, is there a member of the public? Ms. Lasher?
Do I just sit here?
You can, if you could stand if possible, and just state your name and address before you begin speaking.
Lori Lasher, 31 Price. I just wanted to, express my thanks to the Borough Council and to everyone who did, in fact, work throughout the election tirelessly. It was a long day, and it was, rainy and wet in many regards, but it was my first time to go through an election, and I just wanted to congratulate basically everyone who did get selected. I wish you nothing but the best, and look forward to, hopefully continuing to participate to bring to your attention some of the issues that people who were supportive of me still have with respect to the borough. But I, again, just wanted to congratulate each of you. I did put a Facebook post in the Narberth Community Network. You can read it. It's a little bit lengthy, but hopefully you'll take the time. But I just wanted to say that, it was refreshing to see in my travels around Narberth how much, regardless of position, regardless of, age, regardless of, economic stratus, whatever, or party, that there are so many people that love this town. And we may differ on how we see Narberth progressing, or maybe the best ways to do that, but I'm confident that we can work together to see, good days ahead for Narberth. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to make a comment from the room? Seeing none, I'll move to the Zoomery.
So it looks like we have one member of the public on the Zoom. Carol Marie, would you like to make any public comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. We will close agenda item number 5 and move to number 6. We do have some informational updates. Is that correct? For subdivision land development?
I don't
No.
believe so.
Moving to number 7, A. Presentation regarding infill development by the Planning Commission. Mr. Bressi,
Stands here.
the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to do this. It's a big day for us to get to present to you our thoughts about the new zoning project. We were asked by council several months ago to reconsider the question of whether or not, or in what circumstances, accessory dwelling units might be permitted in the borough. So we issued a report to you on that, our findings. At the same time, the Planning Commission charged itself with the question of how to encourage new development, infill development that is smaller than we've been seeing, particularly with the hope that if it were smaller, it would be less expensive, and therefore we would be offering housing at a wider array of price points in the borough. We can't control what people charge or pay, but the theory is if the houses are smaller, they might be less expensive. And finally, I'm stating the goals for what we submitted. The third goal is we did pass the historic district ordinance. You passed it, and we appreciate very much your support with that. But that does provide some constraints on property owners about what they can do with their properties. And I think in recognition of that, we have to look at ways to allow property owners who are in the historic district who have historic houses, contributing resources, but large lots which might be usable for other purposes, to have options for what to do on their lots. That's good planning to make sure your zoning and your historic codes are consistent with each other. And so we have a number of recommendations to you about how we can add new building types or tweak the code we have now to make it easier for people who have houses and big lots to be able to build on their lots since they cannot now tear their house down without much of a process. So that's what drove us to do this. Your request, the observation about house sizes and house prices and the need to think about historic properties. We have presented to you recommendations about accessory dwelling units. That's one category of things. And then a number of recommendations about infill development. Those involve the creation of 2 new housing types or building types which are designed to be built smaller on smaller lots. One is a cottage, which essentially is a single-family house that can be built on any lot that's too big for a single-family house to be built on now. There are a couple of key dimensions that we have requirements for single-family houses, a lot size and a lot width. And that prevents a lot of lots, or a lot of subdivisions or a lot of lots that are being used for single-family houses. I was just talking to a neighbor today who wanted to buy a vacant lot that's on the market. He actually couldn't build anything on it because the code wasn't consistent with the lot. So this would allow single-family houses to be built in smaller lots. They would be smaller houses. Second housing type we've proposed is called a Muse, which is simply a small row of houses that turned on its side to get rather small houses working their way back from the street into a lot. And then the third thing we've proposed is tweaking the dimensional requirements for twins slightly, reducing the minimum lot size, at least, I think we're thinking about at least 3 feet, maybe more, and reducing, lot width, and reducing the minimum lot size so there would be more opportunities to infill with twins. And then the last thing we've proposed is a change in how we would approach large sites. Right now, in Norberg, you can only have 1 building on 1 lot, except in the 5A and 5B zones. We have provisions for larger site plans. But in the other zones, the 3 and 4 zones, you can only have 1 building on 1 lot. So that means every time you want to add a building, you have to subdivide. And what that means is if you have to subdivide, maintain all the setbacks and those lot requirements and things like that, it's a very inefficient process for infilling. And it's very difficult. In fact, we've seen 3 cases at the Planning Commission in the last year or 2 where people have had to come in for like exceptions or waivers to subdivisions because they just couldn't quite subdivide right. So we've had to work things out with them. So the proposal is to allow more than 1 building on a lot, like a condominium. We used to do that before the form-based code. You could have 1 lot with 2 houses on it. And what we've done is we've proposed rules about how that would be evaluated, which I could go into if you wanted to, but that's the last topic. So those are the 4 proposals we're making about infill development, and there's also the proposals about accessory dwelling units. I'll stop there because I'm sure you've got lots of questions, and it's better to answer questions.
Okay, council members? Councilor Fortner.
I'm sure you guys thought about this and I just don't know the answer to it, but the overlay zone is only in the historic district and it only applies to lots with a contributing resource on it. I'm asking this question because my house was built in 1946 and so it's not covered by any of that.
Right.
And I'm just wondering why tailoring where the overlay zone was done.
It's a good question. And it may be worth evaluating. But the reason it was done was primarily because of where we started with our question, which was for homeowners or property owners in the historic district who have contributing resources, their ability to use their property is constrained in ways that yours might not. You could tear your house down.
Yes.
But it may be okay.
Yeah.
So to consider whether it would apply to your life.
Like,
that's just where we started.
Like an infill with something, I don't know. I'm like, I just think,
Is your lot big enough to add something?
I don't know. I mean, it's a pretty deep backyard. It's a pretty deep backyard, but.
Yeah, but we could look at that.
Yeah.
But the reason was because we wanted to address situations where basically people have wider lots along the street. than
Okay,
you can.
yeah, mine is not a wider lot along the street. It's deep.
The accessory dwelling unit is something that would apply. That would not be just in the historic district.
Right.
So that's something.
Right, I know, I just was wondering why it looked like, it just felt like it might be excluding some options that, from someone who might be able to take advantage of it.
It might be. So you can always build out from that if the idea works. And one thing I was thinking about today when I was talking to my neighbor who wanted to buy the weekend lot, is maybe we'd allow the same things to occur by special exception in other areas if the owner demonstrated certain things. But we haven't really studied what the impact of that would be. We've just focused on that history. So,
Thank you.
sure.
Council Records?
The accessory dwelling question was one that we got actually the first time that we ran it. It's the first question about grading up. And I had to Google. And at that time, we then took a look, and there was only really a handful of properties that at the time could accommodate an accessory dwelling. Do you have a sense now with what you're proposing with the Muse and accessory dwellings, like what percentage of the properties would even qualify into what you're suggesting?
It would be a small percentage. I mean, I'll bet you there's only a couple dozen properties in the borough that are big enough to allow for the addition of maybe 100. I don't think it's that big. I don't. So I don't think it would be. I mean, we could go back and take a look. I don't know that it would be.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not going to hold you to that number. It's an unfair question, but
But it's a small proportion of the lots.
Thank you.
Mr. Bush?
Yeah, so my sense is that for an ADU, usually it belongs to the owner of the property, right? The ADU and the main house belong to the same owner. For the other infill that you're suggesting, or that you're proposing, would there be one owner, or would there be potentially split owners?
We split owners.
Okay.
So like if you're subdividing, some of the options we are proposing are ways of subdividing, so that would be fee simple ownership. But we're also proposing that you could condominium occupancy, you have one lot with two houses on it, then you'd have two owners on one lot. So that, in both cases you would, or one person could own both and rent one out. Yeah, that's not really a condition in any way.
I had a question about the Muse style of housing. I don't know if maybe there's a location in the borough specifically where you saw this as a possibility. I'll start there. Is there a specific?
You would tend to get that on lots that are somewhat deep. So one of the possibilities is 146 Marion, so I need it there as a mention. I think it could be an option, but this big property, it's got a 400 or 500 block of Haverford Road. I forget the number, Avenue, I'm sorry. But that's another possibility. It kind of backs up to the Twin Lane. The lanes just kind of off the Twin Lane, perhaps. That would be a second option. There might be options on Wynwood Avenue, where those lots are like super, super, super deep. And that might be a really good solution. You keep the historic house up front, put some Muse in the back.
So
those are the types of considerations, locations for that might occur.
All right, and that led to my second question about the Muse, which is sort of you're creating a lane or some kind of drivable path, right, to support these homes, and sort of how that changes sort of the interaction with the streetscape, right? You're creating a lot of sort of private little nooks and crannies. I don't know if that was discussed.
Yeah, it would be like a driveway or an alley or a lane. It would kind of be like, it would have the kind of feel of like Twin Lane, like that has that kind of little narrow street, maybe even a narrower street, but you know how that kind of feels like it's off the beaten path, and get back and get in there. That would be the idea. Except that's at a larger scale, I think that it can happen somewhere else.
Okay,
I do have
Sure.
one question on that.
I'm done.
It's about the cottage housing type, and I think I'm probably just missing something, so I'm just going to ask you to explain this. Because I'm looking at it and thinking, well, what if you just provided for a smaller, minimum lot size? Say, if you propose 3,000 for a cottage, in zoning districts where that made sense, if people could, I mean, right now, the minimum lot size is typically 6, I think, in most of our residential. So if you said you can have a minimum lot size of 3,000, people could, under our current zoning, build homes this small
Right.
on that lot. So
Right.
it's not really, I mean, it's the lot size that's creating the option,
Why not just change the lot?
yeah, why not just change the lot size? Is it because the idea is, you explain it to me, I just want to make sure I get
Well,
it.
that's something we discussed, and that's a valid point of policy debate. The reason we fell in this direction is there's some attributes of the cottage that are different. There's a lower height limit and a maximum floor plane or floor area in the house. So it's by design a smaller house than you could build if you build a detached house. Detached house also, that's what we call a single family house, we call it a detached house. Technically, under the code, it can have 2 units in it. And so we decided that that would not be appropriate for these smaller units. So the reason, Michelle, is to drive it to smaller, less expensive units. And we thought that was a fair trade because we're allowing a property owner in that situation to do something now they can't do. They can now do more than they would be able to do more than they can do now. They might not be able to do as much as they could if they had a bigger lot and could build a single family house. But on that, it's a plus as an option to a property owner. But it makes the infill smaller. Which
Yeah, that
that's why
makes
we
sense.
proposed it that way.
In theory, do you see the cottage housing type as having to have the same sort of frontage requirements as a detached home? So you couldn't say if you had a big lot, build 2 cottages, one in the front, one in the back.
Well, first of all, I would see a cottage having the same frontage requirement. However, it's kind of an interesting question because we have this other proposal that you could do a condominium and have more than one house on the lot. If your lot was big enough, conceivably, you could build 2 cottages, one in front and one in the back, if your lot was big enough. If you made it like a condominium solution.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if that's what was sort of being proposed here, was that the cottage in the back might not necessarily might not need to have a primary frontage line on the street
Right.
like our typical form-based. Is that?
The one in the back, right, it wouldn't need to.
Okay.
Right, the way it gets a little complicated now, but the way we've talked about the larger kind of site plan approach, where you have more than one building on a lot, is you have to fill in your buildings first to fill in the frontage line rules. So you have to build them at that. But if you want to add buildings after that, you can put them in the back. So you still have to meet the frontage with the first building you build. But if you build any subsequent buildings, those are the ones you can put in the back. So that we still maintain that street line. I think, though, another thing we want to embed in this condo process is the goal is to provide more site planning flexibility for these lots. So it's something you commonly see on these lots. If you have a historic house and a lot next to it, what do you see? You see a specimen tree. And so this might also allow us to provide flexibility to do more tree preservation in accompanying the development if we provide more flexibility. So the frontage, while we desire the frontage to fill out, I think we're also looking at ways to provide opportunities for the maximizing that kind of site planning as well. Move the house back so we save the tree. And that's another reason why the house is good for it to be smaller, because it gives you more flexibility. Councilor Wordsworth?
My question pertains to 3C, allowing multiple primary buildings on the lot with site planning flexibility. It looks like the Planning Commission's recommending that these only be allowed in parts of the borough where there's already a building that would be an existing contributing resource.
Right.
And I'm wondering why that would not be desirable, say, in an instance where there was a newer home that could be, if it were going to be torn down and replaced with this type of a proposed plan development of multiple structures.
It may or may not be desirable. I think that's a different policy question there that we didn't think about. It would require thinking about it from a different direction, because in other situations, what you might be in a situation there then where somebody says, well, I'm going to tear down my house. I'm allowed to tear down my house. And I'm going to fill it in with these different units. And that may be desirable. I don't know. We didn't study that. We thought it was important just to start, because of what we were seeing coming to the Planning Commission and the kinds of cases that were coming to us, we decided it was best to start to deal with issues we saw actually coming in across the desk, as they say. If this works, if we can write code that it works and we like it, and it turns out to work, then we could consider expanding it to other areas. But we'd have to ask ourselves, you know, are we, what are we incentivizing more of the older houses, or of the less old houses to be torn down for this kind of development? I don't know, because we just haven't thought about that. So,
And
we
the risk.
thought it's a different policy question that we could better reserve for another time.
Okay, and at risk of you maybe having to repeat yourself, I see that like the Cottage, the Muse, the multiple development are all ideas that are incentives for people who, with large homes, large lots, to have other ways of developing those lots. In what way, what scenarios would you be hoping to prevent from happening, say, given the current form-based code?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the development of multifamily within an existing resource, or what is the what are you hoping to prevent from happening by incentivizing with these measures?
Well, part of it's both prevention, but it's also to answer the prevention question.
Okay.
Some of the cases we've seen have involved people who've needed to tear down part of their house in order to get a workable lot. That happened on Dudley.
Yeah.
It almost happened on Chestnut, but we were able to avoid it. Where someone wanted to tear a bay window up, a perfectly good bay window, just so they could get 2 feet for a property line. We said, like, would you like to keep the bay window? They said, yeah. And we said, well, that's kind of crazy. We shouldn't have rules that make you tear off bay windows. So we had to like find a workaround for that. So that's what we're trying to avoid, is situations where people are kind of cutting off parts of houses to make them a lot. That's because we're seeing it at the Planning Commission.
And that could be allowed
for like saldo waivers because they have to build cranky lines. We don't want that. So we're trying to give them more flexibility.
I guess I was under the impression that we had sort of, by enacting historic preservation ordinance, we had kind of prevented a lot of that from happening already. So now we're kind of being asked to provide more incentives that will allow more development, even within lots that we've already kind of been able to protect. And I guess the idea is that it's to incentivize lower cost.
We're trying to keep hardship cases from coming to your desk. How about that?
What's that, sorry?
We're trying to keep hardship cases from coming to your desk. Someone could say, well, I have a hardship. I need to tear my addition off, or my bay window off, so I can subdivide.
Okay. Thank you.
But all I can say is it's very common when you have passed a historic district ordinance of any sort to go back and reevaluate your planning code and try and anticipate where there might be conflicts and to try to make your code consistent so those are avoided. I think what we're really trying to avoid is the property owner coming and say, hey, now I can't do anything with my property. That's wrong. You know, and I agree with that. I agree that it's wrong. And property owners should have a right to do something with their property. So what we're saying now is okay. In exchange for restricting what you can do with your house, we're going to give you more options for what you can do with the rest of your property. That's a trade.
Thank you.
It's a trade that hopefully means that we've done this thoughtfully in a way that, you know, is defendable.
Okay. Any other questions for this?
I do, just
Michelle?
one more time, because I know I'll be asked this, so I'd like to ask you first, because I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I see, I read the discussion of parking and ADUs, I get that, and it looks like multiple primary buildings on a lot with site planning. I see there's a reference to parking. I'm wondering how the Cottage form and the Muse would coexist and interact with our existing parking requirements.
I don't think we're proposing to change our parking requirements there. So if they have one unit, they'd have to have a parking spot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bressi.
Any other questions? All right. So what we're hoping to do, if I may, is receive feedback from you so that we might proceed to take the next step and really try to develop code that we can bring back. So that's why we came to.
Thank you. The ball is in our court.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, for 7B, I will hand off to the Borough Manager.
Great, thank you, Council President. So for the 2022 budget, I provided the figures for that to Borough Council in your packet. There's no narrative component because I didn't want to write a narrative component without knowing what the actual budget numbers would be. So if you approve, whatever numbers you approve tonight, the budget that you'll get to actually vote on the 17th will include a narrative component with it as well. The main changes from what I presented last month, I don't really want to redo the whole, dog and pony show I did last month. But basically, I was able to update a lot of figures based upon, having another month of financial data historically to look at. I was able to get firmer costs on our health insurance. I was able to talk with Laura Marion Township about the cost for trash disposal, sewage disposal, and the current policing structure we have with them. So I was able to update the budget with those figures. So this budget, pretty much any number that we can possibly know in advance, we do pretty much know now. I did not incorporate every request or proposal that was brought up to council at our last meeting. In particular, for capital projects, I felt that we should probably do some park planning before moving forward with any capital improvements at Narberth or Sabine Park. So those requests from Parks and Rec were not included, and I had a direct communication with the Parks and Rec chairperson about the thought process that went into that decision. On the policing side, in discussions with Chief Gallagher and members of council individually, we did end up removing the money allocated for body cameras. We did leave money for tasers, but I think there's some further discussion that we started tonight with public health and safety on body cameras before making further decisions on that. Also looking at the state of our police vehicles and the costs associated with that and the technology out there with that, as opposed to purchasing any police cruisers, or instead in the budget have leasing 2 vehicles as opposed to purchasing a vehicle. Let's see here. I think the other big change that was made in terms of proposals was, what else did I not do? I think pretty much everything else in terms of requests that were made, I was able to incorporate. There was a request I received earlier today that's not incorporated that I promised to bring to council for your consideration. The Narberth Fire Company has requested, so the borough budget does currently restore the $40,000 match for fire equipment. The fire company has requested that council consider making a operating contribution to the department as well. So I wanted to bring that to your attention tonight before making a vote, or you don't just have to vote tonight, but before I try to finalize these numbers, getting your thoughts on that.
Was there an amount?
Yes, there was a request for $50,000.
I'm sorry, in addition to the 40.
Correct, yes. So, council, I encourage you to give me some feedback on that, as well as I'm happy to answer any specific questions. And if there's a majority of council that wants to make any changes to these numbers, I'm certainly happy to accommodate that by the 17th.
Go ahead.
Question?
Councilor Richards.
There was a discussion some time ago about the percentage of fire calls that we answer to outside of the borough. And is there some sort of payment partnership or cost sharing given the percentage of time outside of the borough? Has that ever been resolved?
So it's about 2/3 of the calls are outside of the borough, and it has not come to sort of there's an MOU for how we operate, but there's not an MOU sort of with a reverse financial structure similar to our MOU with the police. That does not yet exist.
So I would then just suggest, I would be interested in looking at that MOU, because my understanding was, and this was some time ago when I was on public health and safety, was that there is a model of other municipalities who kind of cost share in this way. So before we invest another $50,000, I'd like to really explore that MOU potential.
Question?
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned this to Samantha, but I feel that our contribution, so they're asking for a match for fire vehicles in particular, and I feel that they should have a plan to transition to electric vehicles before we agree to contribute to funding said vehicles, because we should not be funding the purchase of fossil fuel vehicles at this point. I have the same, do they make them? I think they do. But if they don't, then I withdraw my objection. And it's the same for the ambulance service, that we're being asked to contribute toward the ambulance vehicles, but I would like to see some sort of plan that they have for their vehicles being electric before we make further contributions to these vehicles. And I want to make sure we're not leasing to own these police cars as well.
Fair enough. So with the comment of the fire engine, so the way it works is the borough is actually the keeper of the money, which seems a little bit unusual, but the borough is actually the keeper of the money for the fire engine. So even if we put money into it, I mean, we could decide that we're not going to allocate that money unless it is electric, depending on where the technology for where that is when we have to actually consider that purchase. So that's just something to throw out there on that end to consider. For the ambulance vehicles, I can't speak to that, but I can definitely ask the ambulance company about it. With the police vehicles, that's correct. They would not be leased to own. They would be leased until we're in a position where the technology is there to buy a electric vehicle or that sort of thing. And then for the oh shoot, what was the other one you mentioned? Was that all? Okay.
Yeah. Well, then if we're in a position to tell the fire department, then that's what I think we should tell them that this is contingent on purchasing an electric vehicle down the line. To make it clear to them so they know what our stance is.
Respect to Norbert Danvins, I can't find it in the budget, but they typically ask us for support. I mean, they're an independent organization. They ask us for sort of a flat dollar amount, not to buy the vehicles, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I'm not personally comfortable making that support contingent on electric vehicles. And when we're talking about ambulances, I'm maybe willing to give them some slack on burning a little extra carbon because it's an ambulance. So, and plus I don't really know that we have the authority to do that. I mean, they're an independent organization. So, but
they're asking for more this year. That's why they're asking for an additional amount. And I think it is specifically listed in this as a vehicle fee. If I remember looking at that.
Just
Ms. Brian. Sorry, and then Bob, sorry. Go ahead.
So two clarifying points. So they traditionally ask for $5,000 a year, which is based upon a formula for the percent of calls they do in Norbert versus other locations and their total budget. The borough did not make a contribution in 2020 to the ambulance company. That's why they're asking for an increased amount in 2022. They're asking to make up for 2020 plus the $5,000 we would ordinarily contribute.
And I think it's understood it's a makeup, not a new normal.
Yeah, that's correct. And then, and with the vehicles, they did tell me that that is what they do with that money. They put it aside to be used for vehicle purchases down the line.
I was just going to say, over the years, the amounts of contributions that the borough has made to organizations like the ambulance company or the fire company have really been at the discretion of borough council. They don't, it's not, there's no requirement that we make a contribution to the ambulance service. I think we could contribute more. We can contribute $2,000. I think this is just the amount they've requested this time.
Okay. I actually, I like where Fred's going. If there's not leadership steering purchasing in a certain direction, especially when the finances of sort of one versus the other are very neck and neck, it's very easy to stay with the known, the comfortable. And I think that this council can issue that kind of directive, and I can speak for everybody, but while also being pragmatic. We're not going to not have a fire truck, but should at least explore every option to do it, and I think it also steers this world in the right direction when a fire company calls the manufacturers and says that they are interested in such a product, because if nobody calls and asks, they're not going to make one. So,
I just would add that the carbon pricing scheme that the EAC has recommended could potentially get us to the point where we might charge an internal fee on a combustion engine fire truck. You know, it could be as an extra charge of $100,000 that goes into a green fund. You know, so we may have a mechanism to offset the carbon.
just not to dive too deep on this, ambulances tend to run 24 hours a day, right? Which has its own set of operational challenges for an electric vehicle. The fire engines, or the apparatus, the engine that we got rid of that was 33 years old probably had less than 10,000 miles. So you don't actually use a lot of fuel because they spend most of their time just sitting here. So it's just something to think of.
This is not about electric trucks. So if we're still on that out.
Well, we're talking, I think we started down this path talking about the request for operating budget support for the fire company.
Okay, so can I piggyback on that though? Because, so 118-ish dollars are reserved for 2 full-time housemen. And those are staff members for the fire company. So
it's a split. I mean, they also serve as the maintenance men for this facility.
Okay. So I guess my question then is, so when we're bundling our contributions to the fire department, we should also note that then at least half of that 118, is going to support the fire company as well. And I do wonder if in the future we could think about then that other half of being, and I'm looking in here, like maintain borough facilities, provide immediate on-call services for fires. Okay, so the maintaining borough facilities, that maybe we can think about what new roles does that look like as housemen, which is that's got to be a super antiquated term, right? Housemen?
It's not, I don't think so.
Really? I don't know anyone who knows. What I've been asking around, like, what's the houseman?
It's the person who's always around the house.
Okay, well, I'm calling it a house person.
Go ahead.
Perhaps that we could expand that role a little bit more, especially since the building's open up, maybe really thinking about how we could efficiently utilize those 2 full-time positions or 2 half-time positions as a municipal worker. But anyway, I just think it's important for the public narrative to appreciate then that salary also goes to support the fire company.
So you're asking for direct, sort of feedback and direction. I think the position this council took probably about 5 years ago was that it wanted certain financial reporting from the fire company to show that the funding levels that we gave were necessary to maintain the fire company. It has different sources of income, whether it is donations from residents, whether it is grants and state aid, et cetera, and it has cash balances. So I think if we wanted to stay with that policy, I don't think this council has any interest in starving the fire company. I think it's quite proud of the service of the fire company, but we want to make sure that it's financially necessary, right, and in the correct amount.
I agree. I felt like I just needed more information. Their request was just, we'd like $50,000. Okay. Can you tell me why? Tell me more.
After the meeting, there will be a subcommittee to discuss the use of the word houseman. I see Bob is doing some research.
So I guess then my last question here for council is, does the majority of council want to make any other changes to these numbers before I put a narrative together and present it for a vote on the 17th?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
There's $30,000 allocated for parks and open space maintenance. And I just was curious as to what that was, because in the comment, it said additional 15,000 requested for Parks and Rec. So I'm assuming that's different from what you mentioned earlier that you said wasn't incorporated in the capital improvement plan, but this must be something else. And so I was just wondering what that was
That's
for.
correct. Yeah, these are the operating expenses for the park, so park maintenance and that sort of thing. My understanding is that historically, Parks and Rec has been budgeted 15,000 for that. However, talking to Parks and Rec and looking at their actual costs is why they requested an additional 15,000, because it appears that their historical costs have been closer to 30.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just that one line item that we talked about, infrastructure, the fire alarm replacement, so I still want to see, that was a 100,000, or 90 to 100,000, I forget the exact number, significant amount. I just would like to see a fuller justification of that before I sign off on that.
Yeah, and
Doesn't have to be
so,
today, but.
yeah, I don't think, even once we commit to the budget, once we actually go through that borrowing, yeah, I think there's going to need to be, before we start spending money from the borrowing, there's a list here of projects, but I mean, we're not, that can be changed as needed if we want to, yeah.
Okay, so we're not thinking of the list of projects for the building as being locked in now, that'll be discussed
Right.
again.
Really, the part I just want to make sure we're locked down is borrowing $1 million right now, and then,
All right,
yeah.
that's fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other budgetary questions? Councilor Rickard?
I'm sorry, so I did see and I think it's worth noting publicly, that we nearly doubled the contribution to the Narberth Business Association and the new organization with the structure of events to really support those events coming forward. And then I'm assuming in F&A, we'll talk a little bit more about how those funds are earmarked and a reporting structure.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And the second is a conversation I actually had with Mike Simonson when we had an F&A, one that we started to think about. As I look up, this time last year, we had discussion of finance administration, I should say, with like, hey, with everyone working at home, should we explore, I'll use myself as an example, I wasn't paying Philadelphia wage tax because I wasn't working in the city, I was working at home. And at the end of the day, we concluded, like, this is temporary. By the time we figured out how to actually collect that tax, we'll likely all be back to work. Well, a year later, we're starting to realize that folks really aren't returning to their work location in a way that we had anticipated. We explored an earned income tax priority coming from at the end. Fred determined that we would get half of it to the school board anyway. A resident asked me, Mike Simonson asked me today, like, hey, again, I'm not working in the city. Should I be paying a wage tax to Narberth? And this is probably a discussion for F&A, but given the fact that this budget is going to your final review, I guess I would just kind of publicly ask, there is not a way for us to reconsider, because it's not a business privilege tax when you're working remotely at your house. There's not a way for us to absorb a wage tax from folks who are now working remotely, correct?
That's correct. We would have to adopt that earned income tax to do that.
Okay, and we already decided that was not worthwhile for our boroughs. Okay. Thanks.
There's your answer. Okay. All right, you have what you need?
Yes, so thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to 7C, Bridge Art. I believe we have two guests, so I'll hand it off to Manager Brown.
Yeah, if I can maybe lay down some ground rules here, make sure we're all on the same page with what's going to happen here tonight. So my thanks to Mr. Brussi as well as Michelle Carroll for their efforts, to help find the artists and work on getting these presentations together for tonight. And my thanks to the artists for your patience with the process with the bridge. I think the council may have started this process a few years back, so I'm grateful that you're all still interested in providing samples to the borough and all that. We have 3 of the artists here in person. We have 1 artist on Zoom with us tonight. So generally, each person is going to be provided 15 minutes to share their vision with Borough Council and answer any questions that Council has. I did not receive any submissions prior to the packet going out, so I used the most recently available thing. However, in the few days since then, we have received updated submissions from the artist. So I will be sharing on the screen here, and I will zoom in as necessary, the most recent display piece of art I've gotten from each artist. Now we're going to go in alphabetical order based on last name here tonight. So first up, if I could get, let me see my list here. If I could get Ava Blitz, please. Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight. So Ava, I apologize. With the documents you sent to me, there's a whole bunch of images here. Is there any one in particular that you want for our council to review?
Well, it kind of got changed very close to the end, and so I prepared a specific presentation that kind of makes sense. So no, I can't cut it down. It's,
Can we just show them one at a time?
I can, spend 15 minutes.
All right, so there's I believe 47 images you
Yeah,
have
I'm
here.
not going to show them all.
Okay, all right. Well,
But I also, if possible, I would like to control the images. That way,
unfortunately, that's not possible. But I'm happy on the computer here to do whatever zooming you need, or move on from each item that you need.
And the reason is because we are on Zoom, and so there's no way to broadcast the images on your computer
this can't be
to people at home.
connected to Zoom.
No, not in that way.
Okay.
She could dial into Zoom.
Keep this meeting moving.
All right, so let me get my screen shared, and we'll go through the images here.
Yes. Feel free, come on up, Ms. Blitz, and you can put your laptop there, and we'll try to coordinate with our manager to be showing the images you would like to show, when you would like to show them.
All right.
So just give me one sec here.
And I have not started your time yet, so we're going to get set up first.
Okay, so that number 20.
Yeah, I know it's number 22. Let me zoom in a little bit on this for council.
Okay, let's start on number 20.
All right, absolutely.
Nice TV we've got now. Huh?
What's that?
We got a brand new TV.
We appreciate not having the color bar. I know, the strange colors no longer there.
I'm going to pull up your presentation. I got the images separate from the presentation. So let me pull that up for you. We're not starting your time until I pull it up. All right.
We could move Carol Marie a little bit to the side.
Yeah.
And then bridge art. Number bridge. Is it Blitz?
Should I start talking while he's doing it?
No, we'll get it set up.
Give her a moment.
Okay, because
I
I
want you
have just something to say before.
That's fine.
The images.
We'll get to the right spot, and then we'll begin.
Michelle, I don't see an image 20 in here. Do you know where I could find that one?
I'm going to have to check my email. I'm not on my work computer. Can Ava start on 22 and then we'll go back to 21 and I'll send it over to you?
Well, I'm going to let Ms. Blitz just share her opening statement while you take a look.
As Michelle left it.
Okay. Well, my name is Ava Blitz, and I'm an artist experienced in carving, in relief, in mold making, casting, in concrete, glass fiber reinforced cement, including color, as well as in mosaic. And I've done quite a few large public art projects. Thank you very much for inviting me to present. I would be delighted to do a project in my own neighborhood. I lived in Narberth proper in the past, and presently just outside of the borough, but with a Narberth zip code. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
It's been rather difficult to come up with designs without a set material and even the tasks of who does the molds, who does the fabrication, etc. But I've come up with a concept that would make a strong concept for the Narberth Bridge. My concept takes its cue from the natural world. It's part of Narberth's charm, and it's universally accessible, both to children and adults. Well, at the same time, it will create a landmark for Narberth. It will create a place-making symbol for Narberth that combines natural history and cultural history. It's kind of what my work deals in, a combination of natural history and cultural history. The artwork itself would change dramatically according to the time of day and the weather and even the seasons in rain or snow. As you know, for relief, for instance, the sun up in the sky, low or down, it will cast different shadows. It will really create a very dimensional image or more like a linear drawing, all depending on the light. Night lighting, of course, will create yet another kind of experience. Okay.
So I have a Dropbox link, but it's asking me to provide a login for that to get to the presentation. I mean, it looks like I have all the other images, I just don't have 20 and 21. It starts with 22.
All right, let's go with that.
All right, so this is number
So 21 and 22 show you the scale. These are actually taller than a person.
Okay.
They're very, very large. And this concept is an elegant leaf that creates a frieze across the bridge. It's a repeat pattern that would be applicable to relief and cast stone. Swag, the next image. Well, it's actually, could you show the whole image? That's actually, could you fill the screen there? There you go. Yeah, so that's the whole image of that. These could be carved in positive so that they create concave shapes or negative. Shadows will react differently. Okay, the next one. No, that's not in order.
This is what says number 23.
All right. I'll just show you folks. This is another kind of a swag, which those of you kind of familiar with architectural decoration can see that Art Deco images come from these kind of natural forms. And this is another one. Okay. And then we can look at this. So the concept of the natural world kind of developed as I work into something that was a wider point of view. The original name for Narberth was Elm, and there being the Pennsylvania Academy Youth Ballet on the bridge, I decided to do an image of dancing elms in a repeat pattern. So this is what it might look like in stone. Next one, please. Does that fill the whole?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so this is an example of how it would look in a linear kind of way. It looks like a fine drawing. And the next one. You can easily add color in the casting process use a warm base coat in cast stone and add these little bits of color, which also define the seasons. Another thing about early Narberth history is, I guess there were cherry blossoms that were, it was an annual kind of event to come see the cherry blossoms in Narberth. So this kind of refers to that. Okay, next.
Zoom in.
And this is that one on full scale. Okay, similar to Dancing Elms, this is Stone Tree. It's the same concept using the natural world. This is a relief carved in stone. And you can see how dramatic the cast light on the relief is. Okay, next. This is actually construction. Again, how the light changes with the quality of the light. Next. This then would be a building block to create the wall across the bridge. So that relief has actually a coffer, a negative coffer, that is an architectural kind of quality that adds an interesting architectural history to using these in multiples. I have a black and white version. Okay, next. And the color version, blue and green. So these are all possibilities that can easily be cast in concrete. Let's see. Okay, what's next? Got the next one. Okay, that same relief, which is of multiple units, and a lot of my work uses multiple units, which allows it to be both intimate and on the human scale, but also monumental. So you can relate, you go up and touch these things, and it's not a gigantic, unapproachable kind of thing. But I took those same units and created these playful houses, kind of a symbol of the architectural diversity of Narberth's architecture of their homes. Okay, next. Okay, and they could be variously spaced, different colors. Next. Okay, this is a rather playful variation on the theme, and it's called Candy Hearts. It's easily cast in color, repeat relief that reminds me of Candy Hearts and the children of Narberth, symbolizing a love for the town. The heart-like shape could be actually a 3D topographical map of Narberth. And that would be the connection there. Next. This is another possibility. These get a little bit wilder and more fanciful as we go on. So I kind of believe in sharing my ideas like an architect would with a client, getting feedback and trying to get come to a conclusion. So this is our town, and we'll go through these very quickly. It can be in relief. Go ahead. These are variations on the same thing. Go ahead. It can be done in relief and color. Go on. And throughout, there's various ways of, on a really quite small budget, of creating imagery across the bridge with writing, with incorporated in the history of Narberth, things like that. Okay, let's see. Let's very quickly go through the next one. This actually shows the whole ecosystem, and it is very playful. It's almost cartoon-like. It has a childlike narrative to it. Okay, these actually, there's a black and white one that I will show you that is more appropriate for simple relief. And it's a scene from Narberth, trees, houses, a community that's turned into a pattern. Okay, and the idea there, the black and white is simply relief. It could be cast in color or in mosaic. Mosaic would add a sense of color. It would relate to the mosaics that are already on the bridge. Okay.
What do you call that one?
That's called Narberth tapestry. Next. It could also connect to the seasons, different seasons. Next. So spring, summer, fall, winter. Next. Okay, next. This is also kind of a more 30s color scheme that kind of goes with the Art Deco possibilities. Okay, this one I have, again, black and white. It would be the plain relief without color. This is called Sky. I didn't come up with a very good title for this one yet. So it could be in relief or mosaic. It refers to the sense of flying as you go over the bridge up into the clouds. It's kind of a dramatic bridge, so I thought that would be nice. With train symbols that represent the flying by and the trains below. And the last image is birds. It also has a black and white version, but this one is the colored version. Okay, also could be in relief, relief in color, or mosaic. And let's go on. You could enlarge that one. This kind of shows a mosaic, a simple mosaic with very repeat pattern again, square tiles. Mosaic is very rich in color. In this particular project, school children, local school children, could actually be involved in the fabrication of this. Okay, and I've also prepared earlier work. I don't know if we have time for that.
Well, we have about 3.5 minutes left, so
So would you
whenever
like to me to show you? I'm concentrating on big projects that I've worked on. So if we could look at number 1.
I wasn't provided those files.
I'm sorry.
Samantha, I can do that if you let me share my screen.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I'm concentrating on large public art projects with the materials that we're talking about here. So mosaic, relief, also the source of the mosaic and reliefs. So you can get an idea of my previous work.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could fill the whole screen, that would be great.
Don't know that that's going to be possible.
No, that's Michelle's.
Yeah, there we go. It's as good as it's going to get.
Okay, so this is a mosaic at the Martin Luther King Adult Center in Philadelphia. And go on, next. Oh, no.
Sorry about that. New television.
And it shows a kind of a design, a repeat pattern design. And within this natural world are symbols of the activities that take place in the center. So there's dancers, there's bus trips, there's cues, roll-your balls, things like that. Okay, quickly, if we can go through the next one. Shows people interacting with the piece. And this is actually at the Philadelphia International Airport. Also, the idea of an oasis, bringing an oasis into the kind of hectic airport environment. Okay, next. This was my most recent mosaic. It's a 50-foot long piece at the New Jersey Health Department in Trenton. And you can see how the narrative is from a distance. You come up close and you see the very tactile, beautiful iridescent tiles that are nice to touch. create an abstraction. Okay, next. That's a different point of view. Next. Next. Oh, this also, I'm sorry, if you can go back. This also uses the idea, you don't have to go back. There you go. The idea of the seasons. So there is winter, summer, spring, and fall. Next. So these are just some of my manipulated images. It starts with photography, but they're really painting, prints. And these are the sources for some of those images.
You have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, next. We're doing good. Okay, this is a University City Science Center. It's glass fiber reinforced cement cast in color. And I did all the molds, did all the casting. Next. This is the profile view. So a lot of my work has a very different feel depending on where you are, etc. Next. These were cast in concrete. It was kind of a community project at Apple Farm Arts and Music Center. You know it?
My daughter went there.
Yeah, you been there? Okay, cool.
All right, I think we're at our time.
Okay, there's like 3 more.
Go ahead. Go through them real quick.
Okay, next. That's nighttime lighting. This is a sculpture, grounds for sculpture using multiple units, but very playful. Next. This is a path that's paved, but not very conveniently. Okay, next. And these are quickly the relief samples. Next. Next. Mostly carved in stone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that's the first one that was missing.
Oh, yeah.
It shows you the scale of the work.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time, Ms. Blitz.
Thanks very much.
Manager Brian?
Sure, so our next person we have up be Miguel Horn, who is joining us here on Zoom today. You have an echo going? I don't know if you have another microphone or computer or something in your where you are.
Is that working?
Still have an echo.
Okay, sorry about that. I was using 2 different devices in the chance that I would be able to be sharing my screen. Okay, I can see myself up there. Thank you, Borough Council. I'd like to thank Todd Bressie and Michelle Carroll for organizing this, Venturi Scott Brown Architects. I first heard about this call, designed to artwork for the bridge in Narberth. I was immediately interested. As an area native with a focus on public art and specifically sculpture, I was drawn to this opportunity. Having spent most of my youth in the borough, I have a deep personal connection to Narberth, and I'm very familiar with the site and the surrounding commercial and residential areas. So just as an introduction, before sharing any slides, just, some background about myself and my connection to this opportunity. My childhood was spent at Galactica, 31 Flavors, West Coast Video, Mapes, 5 and 10, and Ricklands. If everybody remembers those stores. I watched my first movie at the theater in Narberth and played soccer on the athletic fields where we'd watch the fireworks on the 4th of July. My late grandmother lived in the Thomas Wynn apartments, and my parents owned and operated a clock, watch, and jewelry store on East Wynwood Road for over 30 years until developments moved them down to Ardmore. These mom and pop shops are at the heart of the Narberth community and have contributed to its success and its growth. And I think that they help define the culture of a place from within. And that identity has made Narberth so appealing. And it's no wonder that everybody wants to live there. As time passes, the landscape of these main streets do so as well. And the architecture follows to accommodate different businesses and different interests. I think the Narberth that I grew up with is not that much different than the one I still visit with my children, despite the turnover of these businesses. But the soul of the borough, I think, retains that charm. And when I thought of what kind of artwork would best suit this opportunity, my mind kept coming back to this sense of community. I envisioned a portrait of Narberth that, despite the borough's evolution, could capture the history and the present for generations to come. It's a rare opportunity to build a new bridge in our time, especially in a place like Narberth, and perhaps it can serve to span generations. I am quite fond of bridges. If we could start my slide presentation and share the PDF I sent earlier. I'll start kind of walking you through some of my work and past examples of my work.
Michelle, given the issues I'm having with screen sharing with the folks on Zoom, would you be able to please share the document that Miguel is mentioning?
Sure, no problem.
That is, I believe, another artist's work. Would you like to see if I could try sharing my screen?
Let's give Ms. Carroll another few seconds here.
Sure thing.
Did we stop this clock?
Okay. Everybody's gonna have their shake.
There we go. Miguel, you're muted.
Yes. Can we start with the second slide, please? So I recently completed a sculpture for the city of Philadelphia, which is suspended on a bridge structure that crosses over an alley in front of the Reading Terminal Market. And this artwork was installed in August, and it's been received nationally and internationally with great acclaim. It's pretty humbling to have this kind of a welcoming and very rare that a local artwork get this much attention and this much recognition so widely. This was created from water jet cut aluminum plate, and it was created over several years with great precision to integrate into the surroundings quite seamlessly. And we used a lot of 3D scanning technology in order to get some really accurate measurements of these existing conditions. And just the idea of scale, these are each individually about 20 feet tall by 15 feet. And they're set about 20 feet up in the air. And so the next two slides are different views, details of that piece. And then following that is an example of some previous public work that I've done. This is a sculpture called Colossus that's in the entrance to the Brownsville Museum of Fine Art. It is cast in glass fiber reinforced concrete, commonly used building material, and I also believe spec'd for this opportunity. And this piece was created from a small 18-inch maquette. And the fabrication method is quite relevant for this opportunity. We created a digital mold from that small model and machined it with a CNC router to create the final scale mold, which we cast the glass fiber reinforced concrete into. This approach kind of removes some of the process. It's, kind of skips a step and can go from a small scale piece into, the final one-to-one rendition. And that's also how I've worked with many of these other processes. And it's also quite cost effective. It allows you to cut out a couple of steps of the process, allowing you to do some of these larger public pieces with smaller budgets. The next example of some previous work is a piece that is in a playground in North Philadelphia. This is a laser cut steel piece. And it's about this. It's very similar dimensions to the space that is spec'd here for the Narberth Bridge. This is about 50 feet by 5 feet tall, so a little bit taller, but it's this kind of panorama composition. And so this is set upon the south-facing border of the playground. The cutout steel creates this kind of light and shadow design, which also kind of cast some light onto the playground. So these panels were laser cut out of steel and powder coated, and they originated from drawings that I created using some reference and some invented environments. There's a couple more slides of this and a couple different views of it. And so, following that, I have some examples of some screen captures that are renderings of scan data, which I captured in this is just a South Philadelphia, Broad Street streetscape. And so this is a computer 3D model that is an actual representation of a bunch of row homes, brownstones on that South Philly block, and some businesses, and so this is a kind of crucial to my approach of this project. This technology is often used for architectural conservation and surveying, but I've been using it for developing artworks for some time. It's a large environmental scanner which captures all kinds of static and moving data points, and they are translated into machinable surfaces, 3D printable surfaces. So you can see in some of these images that the cornice pieces, even the stairwells and awnings, but even is capturing these organic matter of trees. And if you navigate to the next slide, you can also see that it, has the capacity to capture people as well. There's a person standing there on their phone that is rendered quite accurately, but it still kind of obscures enough detail where it's not a literal representation. And throughout that scene, you can also see these kind of thin slivers of people walking through. So my proposal would be to take scans of large sections of Narberth using this spatial scanner to document the storefronts, the homes that give it this this charm of that main street. And that scan data would then be used to create low relief panels compiled to make the frieze of the bridge. And, as you can see, that architecture is most notable and most accurately reproduced. I think one of the things that's really interesting about this is the impressions of the pedestrians, the vehicles, and other details of the landscape that contributes to this impression of a place. I think these snippets of life are what activate that scenery and give a true reflection of the community that we cherish. Finally, I presented some compositions that are in the final slides, some superimposed images of the that laser cut frieze of steel panels. And so, what I'm getting at here with these images and the proposal is that, in some of the uncertainty of construction materials and accessibility, it's a proposal for an alternative material that could be used. Using the same base design data, you can create, laser cutouts that could create a similar image of, as with these panels. But it would all be based off of actual scans of, the commercial corridor of Narberth and some notable, points of architecture.
Michelle, could you zoom in further on the slide that you have up right now? We keep going.
So you can see at this distance.
Thank you.
The graphic quality of the positive and negative powder coated images are quite visible even without a lot of depth at this distance, which I think is one of the challenges with a very low relief in this format. So something that you'd be able to see at the distance, whether you're driving a vehicle across the bridge, but you could appreciate subtleties of detail as you're walking at eye level on the sidewalk. So at this point, I'm happy to open up to any questions.
Council members? Mr. Bush?
I'm just trying to envision what you're proposing here. It's similar to the image you showed us of the playground, is it? It would be a steel kind of relief. I'm not going to use the right term. It'd be a steel relief similar to what you showed from the playground? Is that what you're showing us here?
Yeah. So this presentation is that it's using one plane of cutout material to create a very graphic design, which would incorporate some of those architectural forms and organic forms. But alternatively, you can use that same information. The scans to create a lower, that streetscape.
What is behind the steel? Are we looking at concrete as the contrasting color to the black powder-coated steel?
The kind of panorama of the streetscape. That shows, quite accurately how that would look if viewed from head on.
So what is behind the steel? Am I looking at concrete behind the steel to provide the color contrast?
In this presentation, yes, you're seeing the concrete that is specked of in this rendering, which is that tan color.
This bridge design would not permit sort of a see-through design. Is that right?
Correct. In this frieze, it's you have the plate mounted to the surface of that concrete to create those positive negative shapes. I did consider, and I don't know if this is something that the architects or the borough would consider, but the portion that is used as a kind of safety fence above the bridge could also be incorporated in this style, and you could recreate the impression of those skylit images, and it's kind of a twofold piece. You're also able to replace those panels with that material, saving costs.
Okay, thank you. I think we're at 15 minutes, so unless there's a final question, we'll move to our next artist. Thank you very much, Mr. Horn.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up here tonight, we have Stephen Lane.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi,
Mr.
thanks for
Lane.
joining us.
Thank you. Where's good to sit?
You're welcome to come to one of these chairs up here if you'd like.
Okay.
And Michelle, if you could, as we did with Miguel Thorne's design, if you could put up on the screen for us the design that Mr. Lane sent over to us.
I believe there are 5 images. Can we just show them in a row?
Sorry, what was that?
Can we just show them in a row? I believe there's only 5 images.
Michelle, if we have the 5, I know I have one right here in my file from you. I don't know if it's an older one or not. Michelle, if you have, I don't know if you have the ones he's referencing or not. As I said, part of our technological limitations here, that's part of why we had stressed just getting one image to share with council really. But we're doing our best here to accommodate everyone really.
Okay.
I believe I have the full file. I'm just downloading now.
All right, thank you, Michelle.
Oh, it's a brave new world. I do so much on Zoom meetings now. Really new.
Yeah, everyone here will attest the borough has definitely learned a lot about doing Zoom meetings over the last couple of years.
And there's numerous platforms, and they're all different. You have to relearn every one of them. So, yeah. Anyway, while we're all waiting, my name's Steve Lane. I graduated of the Pennsylvania Academy. I went from 94 to 90 to 94. And been working in this field ever since. A gallery and commission artist for the most part. I did the Joe Frazier Memorial for Philadelphia. There's a wonderful documentary on that. It's an Emmy Award-winning documentary. It's so fun to watch the whole process of beginning to end through sculpture and bronze processing. I lived in Narberth. That's a start. That's good. From right here, from 03 to 07. And my memories of it is, I grew up in Philadelphia, and it's very gentle here. And one thing that struck me, I remember talking to a friend a lot about it, is that kids actually aren't kids here. And I wonder if that makes sense, is that there is a more gentle atmosphere, and children just seem to grow up more that way, rather than how it is really in the inner city. And I started this project about 5 years ago. I think that's when it first was presented with a partner, and we came up with an idea that we really liked. That partner's no longer interested in, they're off to other things. But I would like to continue the idea. I thought it was a very nice idea. I have done a lot of woodwork, and I'm just enamored by the simplicity of Amish block panels. And there's another slide after this if you show it. Examples like this. And I came up with an idea which was the 3 Billy Goats gruff idea, for kids, and thought of how I might put some simple animal pieces in there, and then come up with a repeating pattern that would appeal to adults and to children as well. For adults, if we bring up the first the next slide. Slide, such an old term, isn't it? If you could blow that up as big as you can. A lot smaller. So this is a repeating pattern of cherry trees, which is, Narberth's tree. And a few of the panels would have a goat in there, and I thought that'd be nice. Maybe little children could come by and find the goat. And what I really enjoy are repeating horizontal patterns, which really make these buildings beautiful. And I thought this would be just a simple design that is modern enough and traditional enough. Let's show the next slide because you can see the overall there. That's probably 2 panels and one of the goats in there. A lot of the work I've done is digital work in the last 10 years, I'd say. And the first maybe 20 years out of school was all traditional work by hand, bronze, clay, wood carving. And I wanted to create something that I thought would be really nice in the different times of day, how the shadows would come across the trees. And the last slide, can they show me? You can see this sort of in a half profile, and you can see how that sort of block design will cast shadows. And there are layers of the trees in front and back. I do a lot of work with the Digital Atelier, which is Johnson & Johnson's sculpture facility. And I take on basically the big wigs in New York and those big clients and do a lot of work for them. So I'm really familiar with the whole sort of pipeline and process from beginning to end, from having pieces fabricated, brought into whatever end material, bronze or GFRC or concrete. So I'm familiar with sort of how to go through beginning to end in that whole process. And this is essentially the design that I would like to make. And I so much more enjoy answering questions than going on with monologues. So if anyone has questions, please ask.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So Narberth has also been traditionally associated with the elm.
Yes.
As opposed to the cherry tree. It's on a lot of the letterhead and different things. Have you played around with different types of trees and different countries?
I did initially, and I thought that officially the Narberth tree was the cherry tree. But that's not so. It's not so. That is what I read. And so, and it was just the overall abstract shape of the cherry blossom tree, which I was going for, and I thought that made nice patterns.
Any other questions?
What is the material? Is this cast and is this concrete?
This doesn't exist in reality. This is digitally made,
okay.
So it's completely digitally made right now. I work with a fabricator who will mill that out of a hard material. And then I work with a couple of foundries in the city. I work with Stratton Bronze, an independent foundry. And one of them, depending on how busy they are, would create molds from the positive that is CNC milled from this digital file. Does that make sense? I mean, sometimes that's sort of talk that people don't understand, but if you kind of get it.
Once you get the mold, then you can
make as many reproductions as you can. I imagine in pulling, fiberglass reinforced concrete or regular concrete. I talked to a concrete person about it who I've worked with before. And he said all of those panels is just a lot of tonnage in straight concrete. So we're probably talking about fiberglass reinforced concrete as a better alternative. It's structurally sound, it's very strong, it's as hard as concrete, but it's a whole lot lighter, so it makes a lot more sense. Also, the color I thought would be very interesting because they are a repeating pattern. They could all be one color. They could be perhaps some pleasing, pastel or earthy color, or they really could alternate colors, and that could be very pretty as well. So there are options in how you can tint concrete and get a different effect.
Any other questions?
Okay, so if you were going to color it, the whole panel would be colored, or would individual bits be? I mean, were you talking coloring?
The whole panel would be colored, yeah. Sort of the form theme again are these block animals and block trees. I've done such high detail work for so many years, and often just leaving some mystery and leaving something sort of broad and simple that is just a more open, interesting kind of thing. Leave people something to imagine themselves.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, sure, you're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. And then next up here, we have Traction Company. So Michelle, if you could please get their document up on the screen. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Sure, yeah, thank you all for inviting me here. Maybe while we're pulling up the PDF, actually there were initially 2 PDFs that were then merged into one. I don't know which version you have as your latest one. If you have the 2 of them, they just follow each other one after the other. It just got broken up in the middle.
We'll see what Michelle has, and again, we'll do our best. Again, I just want to stress to everyone there was a method to the madness of the process that I wanted to follow here, but we're doing our best to accommodate.
Sure thing. All right, so before actually we jump into the slideshow, I just wanted to draw your attention to this for a moment, and maybe we can capture it on Zoom and maybe not. It's sort of a last bet in case this somehow doesn't work out. The design that Traction Company is proposing relies on a narrative that unfolds across the bridge. So I just wanted to, as well as showing individual elements on the computer screen where they can get large but only so large, I wanted to give folks the ability to see them all in context. So if you get a chance during or after the presentation, you can sort of see them all together as opposed to the individual elements that we'll look at during the slides. And on the top is one side of the bridge, and unfortunately there wasn't space to set up easels for the bottom side, so it's on the ground, but hopefully you get a chance to see. Also, we'll see the whole thing on the screen. So now let's begin the slideshow. My name is Morgan Dummett. I'll be presenting for the Philadelphia Traction Company. I'd like to start by introducing myself and explaining why Traction Company was attracted to the Narberth Bridge sculpture opportunity. The Philadelphia Traction Company was founded in 2006 as a shared workshop for sculptors. The collective was founded in a 19th century trolley barn. In giving this once derelict workshop new life as an art studio, the collective demonstrates its interest in the traditional craftsmanship, industry, and ornamentation, hallmarking this now bygone era. At the same time, the trolley barn's continued use as a workshop places it firmly in the context of the 21st century. Its members constantly explore their role as makers in an evolving community, city, and artistic landscape. Inspired by these themes, Traction Company has designed a frieze for the Narberth Bridge, which celebrates the proud civic history of Narberth while looking forward to the borough's future. Traction Company's design uses the motif of a rail bridge to frame scenes of civic industry and the flowering of the Narberth community. Our design honors the specific history and traditions of Narberth while highlighting the borough's place in the larger main line. Recalling Traction Company's ever-changing role in a developing community, the train line motif explores Narberth's place in the greater Philadelphia area as it grows and progresses. Can I have the next slide, please? And here is our design proposal. And again, it's much larger over here, but you can kind of see the whole thing there. Our proposed frieze is divided into a series of scenes with a large central panel flanked by several smaller ones. An industrially inspired framework of columns and arches repeats across the frieze, framing each panel and recalling the sustaining structure of a bridge. And the next slide, please. The framing bridge will contain both structural and decorative elements. Riveted steel girders and arches reflect the importance of solid infrastructure to a thriving community. while ornamental moldings and designs recall an era when infrastructural projects were not merely functional, but sources of beauty and local pride. The scenes framed by the bridge motif focus on 4 civic themes that are both specific to Narberth and recognizable to any town in America. They are independence, education, community, and engagement. They speak to Narberth's history as an independent borough since 1895 and the values which have sustained the town and allowed it to grow into the 21st century. Next slide, please. The independence section focuses on the pride that comes from collective labor towards a common goal. Here we see workers laying the foundation for the borough from the ground up, and the creation of the railroad, from the creation of the railroad to the historic construction of the town itself. In the background, we will see Elm Hall and other buildings of local historic interest. Next slide, please. The education section across the way from the central panel focuses on Narberth's civic institutions and investment in preparing the next generation to move Narberth forwards. Again, we simultaneously honor the borough's historic independent school district and celebrate its commitment to progress, dynamism, and the future. Next slide, please. The community section highlights the joys of a tight-knit community of diverse opinions and shared values. Here we see citizens enjoying recreational activities tied to celebrated Narberth institutions. One scene shows a concert in the historic Narberth Park featuring the actual architecture of the Chet Tyson Pavilion. Sport has always been an important part of Narberth's identity, from its pre-war semi-pro baseball team to the still extant Narberth Athletic Association. In the second scene, we see a modern family enjoying a game of kickball in front of Narberth's historic YMCA building. Next slide, please. The engagement section demonstrates Narberth's commitment to its physical and civic infrastructure, from beautification to community development. One scene shows citizens working in a local garden, echoing the Narberth Civic Association's commitment to greening, planting trees, and beautification. Another scene shows a couple reading in front of the Narberth Community Library, which has been an important institution in the borough for 100 years. Next, please. Now we're going to look at the central panel. As you'll have noticed, there are 4 themes which repeat on the 2 sides of a central panel. The 4 flanking scenes are unique, and the central panel repeats on both sides of the bridge. The large central panel will repeat on each side of the bridge to produce a strong, unified design. It shows a train traveling through Narberth Station to recall Narberth's place as part of the mainline community. Just as the bridge connects Narberth's north and south sides, the perpendicular railroad connects Narberth to the larger Philadelphia region. The train represents forward motion and progress. Just as the train line connects several unique towns to form a larger, richer tapestry, the theme panels illustrate the values that make Narberth more than the sum of its parts. A proud, thriving community, looking forwards while honoring its traditions. Next slide, please. Now I'm just going to make a couple of notes on the theme panels. Notes on the panels, starting with the theme panels, excuse me. Traction Company selected the above themes as representing ideals of particular interest to Narberth. The themes and illustrated scenes are only intended as suggestions, and are of course subject to revision and development, depending on the preferences of the Narberth community. One of the great advantages of so many different scenes is that it allows for a diverse representation of age, race, gender, and so on, to display the vibrance and diversity of the Narberth community. Now a note on the text panels, the text panels being the center of each grouping of 3, having a large block of text in it. Each of the above themes is illustrated by 2 reliefs flanking a central panel of text. The text may be, simply as shown, the theme of each section: independence, education, community, and engagement. This leaves plenty of space for various decorative elements not yet developed. Perhaps a spray of cherry blossoms, an elm tree, or some other locally specific design. If desired, the panels might also contain more text describing the history, institutions, and values alluded to in the relief sculptures. Next one, please. And a note on the aesthetic of the drawings. The aesthetic of the scenes is deliberately modeled after WPA-era sculpture. You can see a couple of examples of WPA-era sculpture right there on the screen. Works Progress Administration sculptures blossomed following the New Deal and can be seen gracing public and governmental buildings around the region and across the country. These strong, simplified designs recall an era of collective effort, unified spirit, and the importance of beauty as a key element of infrastructural projects. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk about the techniques and the mold production that we would use. Our proposal uses traditional sculptural techniques to produce a series of low-relief sculptures. And right there are two examples of low-relief sculptures made by Traction Company members. Low relief is an excellent fit for an outdoor frieze because it can meet the 4-inch maximum projection allowance specified in the RFP, yet allows for rich sculptural forms, which will capture a dramatic interplay of light and shadow depending on the time of day, the seasons, etc. Low relief is an intimately more engaging, tactile, and dynamic solution than a two-dimensional approach. The next slide, please. Each relief will be modeled to scale in clay. Traction Company will produce rubber molds on these reliefs, which can be used for casting cast stone and GFRC. The model for the bridge, which frames each panel, will be composed of a variety of materials, from steel to decorative moldings to clay ornamentation. On the slides, you've seen an example of what this might look like casting concrete. We will also make a mold on this element so that a casting can be made of that framing element for each panel and each scene and assembled easily on site. Next slide, please. Traction Company has experience in producing large GFRC concrete panels and securing them to architectural structures. We have the expertise to produce not only the molds, but the cast panels in-house at a competitive price and to a high degree of quality. The design mock-up is in a standard gray concrete, but if desired, it can easily be tinted to any color. As can be seen in our sample rendering of the bridge, unfortunately from a much earlier slide, and we don't need to go there, but the color might be made to harmoniously match the tan accents at the base and top of the bridge railings. So does this slideshow go on, or was it split into two? Okay, great, perfect. Now that we've gone through our proposal, I'd like to quickly review a few past projects by Traction Company and its members. These pieces demonstrate not only our expertise in traditional sculpture techniques, but our experience working with architects, structural engineers, and other parties to produce projects which are safe, permanent, and engaging. Next slide, please. First, we're going to look at truss, a massive wood and steel sculpture constructed with traditional joinery techniques. We worked with a variety of engineers and curators to ensure that the piece was safe and secure while handling every detail of its 65 feet with minute care. Next slide, please. Next up is North Carolina Quarters, a 12 by 6 foot low relief sculpture made with similar techniques as those proposed for the Narberth Bridge. Although this piece is cast in metal rather than concrete, the principles of low relief modeling and mold making produce a piece which is safe, permanent, and attractive. Next scene, please. Slide, please. Here we have the Discovery Center, another large sculptural panel installed in Philadelphia. Although the materials are stainless steel and cedar wood, we again worked extensively with architects and engineers to ensure a seamlessly designed piece of architectural ornamentation. Next slide, please. Next is Synagogue and Ecclesia in Our Time by Traction Company member Joshua Kaufman. Every detail of this sculpture, from clay modeling to mold making to casting and installation, was overseen with care and constant communication with a wide variety of parties. There's also a fun picture of the Pope stopping by Blitz, which is fun. Next slide. Another project is Philadelphia Portraits, a series of 10 life-size portraits produced at Traction Company. Again, traditional modeling and casting techniques yield an engaging design which recalls the traditions of the past while maintaining a contemporary feel. Next slide, please. Finally, in production now at Traction Company is a large low-relief panel for a labor district hall in Philadelphia. This 6 by 4 foot panel will be molded, cast, and installed by Traction Company Morgan Dummett this spring. Last slide. In closing, here are a selection of sculptures by Traction Company members, which demonstrate our experience with and ability to produce low-relief sculptures like those proposed for the Narberth Bridge at a high level of quality, care, and detail. And I want to thank you all for your consideration. And we should have some time if there are any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I I appreciate this and kind of how, when you're walking across, it tells the story and the history of our town, but I'm really glad that you noted that there is no diversity represented here.
To be wholly honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was sort of like years ago, sort of eyeballing this project, and I was like, that's absolutely
Yeah,
not
so I would suggest that more than a bunch of white guys.
Yes, I would
fill our
100%
town.
agree.
There's a lady teacher. So you would be willing then to say, we are going to sit with Friends of Norwood History and the Civic Association to really kind of represent the diversity of thought race?
I think that would be very appropriate. Yeah.
So,
I appreciate that too.
How would you do that? I mean, is each panel monotone, or is there ability to, how would you do that?
Okay, so it's cast in GFRC concrete, and here it's envisioned as being one color. It would be a question of design and working with whoever we're working with to cooperate on different options, but there would be no inherent difficulty in casting different panels in different colors if that was desired.
Other questions? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And your easel.
I made those this morning.
All right, we will move to 7D.
I should apologize, Council President, just for my sort of understanding, what next steps do council want to take? What's going to be the next steps for the artist here in the project?
Sure, I think next step, I'm open to suggestion, but I think let's sleep on these presentations. We'll meet in 2 weeks. If it could be on the agenda for some discussion.
I don't think 7 people should decide the art of our town. I think we need minimally 3 months to have this for community feedback, voting, comments, and including an option. We have 80,000 budgeted, then 50,000 budgeted?
I believe that's correct, yeah.
Including, like, is there a planter option? I don't know if we want to reopen that, but I do not think 7 people should make a decision about art that's going to be on the bridge for 150 years without tremendous feedback and outreach.
I'd like to have feedback from the public as well. I don't feel, I wouldn't want my own personal opinion and taste and aesthetic to weigh that heavily in a decision that's everybody's going to see every day for, generations. But I think one thing that we might want to consider is if we are asking for public feedback, a number of our artists had represented today had a variety of ideas and approached us from a more conceptual point of view. I think the public would be in a position to have, to really, in other words, I think there would need to be a narrowing down, right, to one specific, to choose one. And I don't know if that would be something that council would want to have a role in having a discussion about that, or leave it up to the artists to choose what they felt. But I think we want to present like one idea per artist, rather than a multitude.
I was going to suggest Mr. Bresci has extensive professional experience in this area, and he's guided the process to this point. Our conversation next week, I hope, could include Mr. Bresci to maybe make some suggestions, if you're willing, for how the process could move from this point forward, what the other communities have done to bring this to success.
Sure. And the point I want to emphasize, which I do think, that's good that we're talking about community input and collaboration. I do just want to emphasize for council as well to keep in mind that the bridge project, this is one of the things that we have to get done before the bridge project can be finalized and put out to bid and all that sort of thing. Amtrak is also asked to see the design. I don't think they're having specific feedback on it. Which is part of the easement agreement we're working on with them, is they want to see it as well. So just so everyone knows the logistics involved.
I certainly don't want to delay the bridge project for this.
No.
I mean, if that's required, I'll pick one
But
tonight, because we can't tell you.
But I would say we specifically chose this sort of design in terms of panels that are affixed to the standing structure to avoid this exact scenario. So just because they've requested it, I don't know that means that they, that it must proceed in that manner, and they should proceed.
And I will emphasize as well, it's not like this is the only item holding up the bridge or anything like that.
No.
There still are a couple other design things we're working to finish up.
But I would like to make sure that it doesn't become the thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it was engineered in specifically this way, so it wouldn't be an item on the table for them.
Right.
So
I'm willing for council to make this decision without, spending months with a community survey. So, I'll go along. I think we're capable of it, but
Fred, I agree with you, but I would like to hear what other communities have done.
Okay.
And learn more about.
So let's take it up in 2 weeks.
What might be the responsible, or at least the best-in-class way to handle this.
Yeah, yeah. If, I said 3 months and Samantha's eyes like bugged out.
Sorry.
I didn't even need to say.
Sorry for that reaction.
No, it was clearly, I didn't realize this. I would propose perhaps, Aaron, that maybe F&A could work with Mr. Bressi, just because we are kind of coordinating the communication plan. So as Todd, as you bring us ideas of like, this is how communities really do this, maybe we could have a solid, like this is how F&A suggests we operationalize this. It would just be the two of us, so it wouldn't be a public meeting, but we could bring it to all of council to review, so we have something really to envision in 2 weeks if we're on that much of a time crunch.
I was planning on working directly with Mr. Bressi to get us to 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
And then once we all sort of have been more educated, I'm entirely open to seeing where this goes.
Got it.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Let's talk about, thank you, Cindy. Let's talk about bike pilot.
Great. So Michelle, given that, like I said, screen sharing is doing a little bit weird on my computer, if you could go into the council folder on SharePoint and open up the item 7D, any one of those documents, so council can see the design for the Haverford Ave bike pilot, please. And when we do that, I'll just speak in generality for a moment here. Council got the brief presentation from the Narber Cycling Club about doing a bike pilot similar to what we did with the Wheels on Windsor project last year on Haverford Avenue. The project would run from Wynwood and Haverford up to Essex and Haverford. It would be a contraflow lane in addition to a on-road shared lane for bikes going with traffic. And myself and Kimberly Bezak from the Cycling Club met with Mike Schneider, the Borough traffic engineer, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and walked that length of Haverford together and talked about any potential obstacles or issues with it. And I think the good news is this is a relatively straightforward design to implement with the width of Haverford and how it's laid out. The main things I'll point out are the things that are most important to me is how does it start and stop. So in terms of how it ties into Wynwood, where we ended up on that was that the contraflow lane, which we'll hopefully have the image up here in a minute, will flow into the existing sort of protected pedestrian area that's on that side of Haverford. And then the lane with traffic would just, it would just end right there, and bikes could then pick up the trail over by the Thomas Wynn if they wanted to continue biking in that direction. At Essex, the contraflow lane would end into that there's a little tiny parking lot right there with stairs that go up to the railroad tracks. It would kind of end right in there. And then there would be signage as well directing bikes going that direction not to continue on Haverford, because then they'd be going against traffic with no bike lane of any kind. And I believe there would be direction to either ditch up in that parking lot, or there we go. That's what we're looking for here. So, Michelle, could you zoom in a little bit on that for me, please? I don't care if we clip the top of it off, just so we can really see the lane itself.
Sorry, my computer went haywire. I'm going back.
Michelle, it might be, sorry not to like backseat drive here, but it might be, if you're able to open up just the actual source document instead of the whole council packet, that might be a little bit more manageable. Oh, you're there. All right, so yeah, like I mentioned, there's some of the signage that would be present, as well as some striping that we would add at the intersections, to help explain things here. The path itself would be separate. The proposal from Panoni, our engineer, calls for hay bales, similar to what we did with Wheels on Windsor, to separate the path. The cycling club did get some feedback yesterday about it, and they did ask whether we'd want to go hay bales or if some sort of temporary reflectors might be a better option for that section of road, given the nature of traffic on Haverford Avenue, as well as giving consideration to how the borough would handle snow removal and that sort of thing with it located there. There were some other comments from the cycling club about the signage as well. So I did pass on those comments to the borough engineer and borough traffic engineer for review and feedback. But essentially, that's what has been provided in your packet, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions from council.
Just one question, I'm sure it has a straightforward answer, I just don't know. The bike lane begins on Haverford Avenue, it looks like I'm going to be 40 feet out from the corner of Linwood. There's probably a reason for that, but how do cyclists get to that contraflow lane? Do we know why? I mean, do you know why it doesn't start on the corner?
Yeah, so when we looked at what we being me and Mike and Kim, the way we agreed cyclists would have to get to the contraflow lane is by using the existing crosswalks there.
The crosswalks across from Thomas Lane to...
So you would come from the Thomas Lane, you would use the existing crosswalk over Linwood, and then you'd use the existing crosswalk over Haverford, and then you'd start biking from that point along the contraflow lane.
My question has to do with the green.
Sorry, make sure I answered.
Because the crosswalk's here, and then the lane starts there. That's why I just want to know where the lane starts.
I think it's intended to start, the bike lane is intended to start where the crosswalk ends, right? The crosswalk,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it doesn't, it's not showing.
Yeah, I think you're just not seeing. Right, I think this is inaccurate.
It's inaccurate, okay, there, well, that explains it. Okay, all right, thank you.
There won't be a no man's land where you're
That's
just...
what I was wondering, I was thinking there must be a reason, I just don't see it,
Yeah,
okay.
but I agree, that's...
Never mind.
Okay, Bob, you look this...
I'm interested in the green striping and where it will be and what purpose it serves specifically. I mean, I see it there, but I just...
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand, especially, I think I understand the Essex Connect. It's an additional crosswalk for bikes to connect to the one-way Essex.
To get them back across the road.
To get them back across to Essex, but I'm not sure if I understand the green striping at Linwood.
Sure, so the green striping at Dudley is...
Dudley. Okay.
No, Michelle, you can leave that image alone.
That would be someone who's coming down
That's a
Dudley and
crosswalk.
wants to enter the bike lane.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Samantha, we are using the south side of Haverford right now for contractor parking for the construction downtown. Do we lose all of that with the bike lane? And
You would. However, the contractors would then be encouraged to park on the opposite side of Haverford, which during the day when the contractors are there, just from personal experience working in the office and seeing the street there, during the time when the contractors are parked, there's not much going on where that side of the parking is used. So it'll just be shifted over to the other side of the street.
Okay, and I would assume if there was some spillover, we could utilize really direct to both Sabine or perhaps with the new parking policy that will happen in the borough lot, we could allocate some of those.
Well, also the Forest Garage, I think will open soon, right? For parking, for the contractors.
Yes, but we'll also have the contractors for the other projects going on.
Okay, great.
Yeah. We'll be able to make it work, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ms.
What
Portman?
did you say the cycling club suggested as the divider instead of hay bales? I didn't.
Sorry, basically, like, my understanding is it will be a, small plastic pole with a reflector on top of it.
Okay. So like the ones that, if you hit it, it's flexible.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We had those on the fridge at one point.
Yeah, because apparently some of the feedback from the Wheels on Windsor project was that when it got dark, the hay bales were kind of difficult for people to see.
Did somebody hit them?
But we do have some new streetlights that
Yes.
increase our level of
Yeah.
illumination. Just want to point that out. Any other questions?
What is the timeframe that we're talking about possibly?
Yes, I mean, if council is okay with proceeding with this, we can, discuss, myself and the engineer can discuss with the cycling club the comments they had, but if council's kind of okay with that approach, then we can get things, figured out with the cycling club and get public works over signage and get it installed. I mean, I imagine we could do it by Thanksgiving.
Okay, there wasn't a plan to wait for the spring.
No.
I want to make sure.
Well, council, feedback in that regard? Hearing any opposed? It's not a formal vote, but. We've got your feedback.
Great, thank you all.
All right, any information items? Number 8. Moving to action items. We have consideration of a COVID policy. I guess we need a motion to put something on the table.
I'd like to move that Narberth Borough consider a COVID-19 vaccine and testing policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. For discussion, we have something in front of us dated November 3rd draft. Thank you for this, Samantha, and discussion.
I'm happy to start off and share my thoughts. We've been pretty committed to doing everything that we can to protect our citizens from COVID, which included asking businesses to close down. Before a local mandate came, our mayor was proactive and declared a state of emergency immediately. We enacted one of the first mask ordinances, and I think now it just makes sense that we are consistent with local and federal guidelines that require vaccinations for employees. Again, consistent with federal, county, and even private practices of keeping citizens safe. Particularly, I'd just like to add, because we are such a small and vulnerable public system, that it is that much more necessary for us to protect, if someone were in the office to be out, and we would have to then potentially quarantine the entire office. All the more reason to use the best tool we have against this pandemic, which is vaccination.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
The only question I have is if someone has a medical exemption, are they then required to pay, who pays for the testing? If they have a medical exemption and follow the rules according to
So it's written, I believe, that you would test on your own time with PCR. You can do that right over at Ardmore for free, so there is no test.
Okay.
There's no cost
There's no
associated
cost.
with that.
Okay.
And you would do that on your own time and submit that. I know when you go to the county, they send you an email, which you could, I guess Samantha would then work out on how she would collect those weekly emails.
Any other questions? All in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
The only question I have for council, actually, sorry I didn't point this out before you voted. The draft has a blank for the date for when employees have to be fully vaccinated by. What date would council like to set? I mean, I imagine something like 4 weeks, 6 weeks from the day.
Can I get a motion to amend the policy?
I move to amend the policy.
Second?
I'll second it.
Second. Would someone like to throw a date out?
What do
you recommend?
Yeah, I guess my point is it's not like somebody who, if there's somebody who hasn't, say, hadn't completed the vaccinations, it's not like they couldn't work, they would just need to do testing, which is free on their own time until they completed it. So I'm not sure what the point is of not starting, of saying, well, let's wait 4 weeks so you have a chance to get vaccinated, because I mean, the
So
principle
you
here
would
is
suggest the
to
date-
protect
the
public
date
health, and this
today.
requires testing.
Yeah,
Not back
agreed.
So I would suggest today, yes.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, for everyone
Yeah.
out there, we are offering the alternative that you get weekly testing.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
not like-
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would apply then.
So I'm hearing that this is a motion to amend the policy for the effective date to be November 3rd, 2021. Okay.
Yes, I also think it's worth noting that while we're obviously not borough employees, that as a council, I think we kind of all agreed that we are going to follow this policy.
Sure.
I want to
As elected members.
second that. So
Yes.
that's what you're saying.
Okay. All
So
in-
does that way, does that clarification require amendment? No, it's
No,
just,
because
you're just
this isn't-
asking,
It's
you're
a
just
personal
asking us to
commitment.
agree all, to not.
Yeah, I think it's just worth noting that we're not putting a policy in place that we're ourselves are not willing to do.
Do you want us each to attest to that?
Yeah, I'd be willing to, I mean, I'd be willing to.
I'm happy to sign something that.
Record,
that
honestly,
says
to
that.
Samantha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
All in favor of making the effective date November 3rd?
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Thank you. You've got your answer. Infrastructure. Do you have a report?
Sure. So infrastructure met October 26th. We worked on the outdoor dining ordinance. There were, it had been given to John Walker the draft. He came back with a number of questions about how to proceed. So we offered a lot of feedback on that. I'm hoping we're going to see that again. I don't know, Samantha, when do you think we're going to see the outdoor dining ordinance come before us?
I could probably say, I'll double check with John Walco, but you might be able to see it in the November 17th meeting.
Okay. Yes, that should be ready to go. We talked about a sidewalk inspection program to be set up for next year. It's in the budget for more time for our code compliance officer to walk over all the sidewalks in Narberth. We may be able to have Public Works employees take care of some of that, but it's to look for areas that are unsafe and inaccessible to identify for repairs. In addition, it's going to require some code changes that I think John Walco is working on as well. We talked about the Haverford Avenue bike pile, which we just saw. No, we didn't. We said it's coming in at this meeting. And we talked a lot about infrastructure projects that are part of that $1 million borrowing that Samantha was mentioning. So these are projects that have been identified for the most part through the KCBA analysis in Borough Hall and in the library building. A lot of accessibility concerns as well as some various other issues that sounds like we'll get to those next year. And we talked a little about the stormwater bump outs. Right now, we were awarded the grant, and they're going to be going to start the project next year. That's infrastructure.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we're going to be working on ordinance for outdoor dining, will there be some minimum design standards attached for those sort of outdoor seating areas? Or because we could borrow them from some other small communities that already generated those, and it could actually really be, it's such important space, I think, in the borough, the residents, that they could be done really well. And I think we also need to have some maintenance standards so that they're cleaned and kept, kept free of leaves and debris and the trash and stuff like that. And I think we could probably borrow a lot, if we don't have that ourselves, I think we could borrow or adopt the language and the conditions, the standards of another community pretty easily.
So I know John was looking at other community proposals. So these do specify cleaning nightly. They specify like an outdoor trash can that is not the borough's trash can for the dealing with refuse. And I'm not sure this is actually in there, but I think the agreement was going to be that the owners of the users of the space would be responsible for things like snow removal and presumably leaf removal. I'm not sure that's actually written in there, or if it was a
right.
kind of
That's
an agreement we'd be reaching
yeah.
with the users of the space. So there were John had suggested some like infrastructure details, like the tables have to be a certain sort of table but I think we were interested in letting people use what they already have, and so they didn't have to buy more, If a restaurant's already got a setup there, we don't want to make them buy a whole new set of tables and a whole new set of chairs, because what they have is basically working. That was our.
I think the thing that I see missing is like in a lot of communities don't bother with like barriers that are going to prevent a car from crashing through those diners, but they have the more attractive kind of surround, like dining surround or barrier, and it's simple. They're simple to make, and really, if they're going to be in our street for a long time, I think it's worth the upgrade investment. I don't know that we've even exhausted all the money that we committed to help the restaurants build those kinds of the extra amenities. And it's nice that we've provided outdoor dining, but I can't say that Narberth's done it particularly well. Like when I go around, it's done really, really incredibly at really high level in communities, the equal size as ours, and we could.
So you're saying we could have classier barriers?
Yeah, well, for sure.
Yeah, Bob, so my question piggybacked off exactly of what you were asking. So we originally, Public Works, the borough absorbed the cost for this kind of temporary water barriers. And again, I don't think anybody imagined that 18 months later we would still be doing it. So I guess my question to piggyback on yours, Bob, is are there funds in Public Works to invest in something more aesthetically pleasing, like other communities have, like Westchester, Media, Philadelphia, and rather taking that from the Narberth Business Association, like asking them to contribute those funds? I would see that as very much part of our social infrastructure, and to suggest that we pull that from our Public Works funds, much as we did with those water barriers.
We could do it equitably, like among the businesses.
Like a cost share, sure, or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure that would need to be in the ordinance, but we could definitely work on it, alongside.
Well, I guess I'd like to see compliance with a standard in the ordinance.
Well, I don't know that the barriers and things you're talking about are borough owned. They're not part of the user's responsibility.
Well, it's the structures. The structures that, I'm not talking about the barriers, I'm talking about the structures.
Okay. But it sounds like that is going to be in the ordinance. Requirement for cleaning,
maintenance to me. Maintenance, but not
upkeep,
not
structural security.
There's the design of
aesthetic standard.
We're a community that has a form-based code. These kinds of things are already done. Somebody's already done them like 8 times over. Where we could simply look around and find one and adopt it. Maybe we could do it later. Maybe we amend it later. We add it later. I don't want to hold it up.
Well, maybe a next step.
I would like to see us look to have that.
Would be to have these comments communicated to the solicitor who's preparing the ordinance, and we can have an additional conversation when he's in the room.
There you go. There's an architect. Many architects have already done little booklets with these things.
Where was that from?
This is Philadelphia has a whole COVID-19 outdoor dining with the requirements and the standards. So it's safe, there's a standard, there's an aesthetic.
We could use the Philadelphia, we could adopt the Philadelphia standards for ourselves.
Well, you're going to want to look at it first, because before you have a surprise that...
I'm not motioning that we do it, I'm just saying that, for example.
You just want to make sure, businesses which have been severely impacted by COVID invested significant dollars in building structures, and you want to make sure if they don't comply that it's material, right? Like you're actually going to get something if they have to rebuild it or take it down or do something. Right? There has to be a good reason. And
if we were starting from scratch, we could institute these standards, but since they have already put solutions in place, I agree with Aaron.
Oh yeah, most of our businesses haven't really built much. They haven't built anything. So I think if what we're talking about is extending the time for this outdoor dining in the street, which I think is a great thing, that we're making use of our street space that way, that if we're going to do new construction, that it be done according to some design guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that, but if you're going to put a new structure in there, I think people who've already invested should be grandfathered in.
Absolutely,
as much as possible.
let's get rid of those barriers to this, and provide something more aesthetically pleasing.
As part of the rules, will the the businesses be required to institute some kind of rodent control
Rodent
around their
control?
outside dining areas, yeah.
I mean, there's regular cleaning specified. I'm not sure there's anything beyond that. I mean, you have to
That's,
have an outdoor trash
it's become a
bin.
little bit of an issue around some of the dining establishments.
Do you have a recommendation? that you
I
Let's just see
don't,
what it says in the Philadelphia
let's
Standards.
see what they, yeah, let's see what they
And
say.
that's an area where I think the feedback that I will offer the solicitor is that we, you know, it's clearly someone has done this work and
Yeah.
where it's possible to add elements, respecting grandfathering. That's the sort of language we'd like to see in this ordinance to make it as comprehensive as possible.
Yeah, but I would suggest, maybe suggesting to John, if it sounds like there's fair consensus on this idea, that we could just indicate in the ordinance that new structures will need to be designed pursuant to guidelines to be adopted, and they can be adopted separately.
Yeah, definitely.
And maybe we can say that in case rodent control is necessary, you know, it will be charged to the account or something. You know.
I suspect
If the borough
rodent
makes a
control's
decision.
already covered in some existing ordinance.
It probably is, but
So
I
I
just
think
want to make
that's
sure.
really just a thing that has to be enforced, but already.
All of a sudden you have
I mean, I don't think-
new areas where there's food accessible, new areas, so I think it's just
Makes a lot of
one item to keep an eye on.
Do you know, Andrew, if you are getting reports of a particular location, if that's an issue for like a health inspector, you know, is it a particular?
You know, it's a good question since it's outside and it's not in, you know, I don't know.
It's on borough property. Like,
Yeah.
it's not on the,
Yeah.
it's on the private property
Yeah,
owner's property.
Yeah.
So I think this is an area where our solicitor can, I think, frame it properly within the law. You know, we're focusing on rodents, but there's something a little more
I'm
abstract.
sure there is,
that
I'm
you
sure
can
we're not
structure
short
for.
of.
Yeah. I sent you all this. I think you're going to find this is exactly.
Great.
Thanks.
Free work.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Is that the rest for infrastructure?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Finance and administration.
You know what? We met right before the last meeting, and then I shared everything with you all.
Okay, great.
There's nothing.
Public health and safety.
Yeah, we met just before this meeting, and we endorsed Samantha's plan for inspections of commercial properties and rental properties. So I believe the next step is for Samantha to work with the solicitor to develop the ordinances to support the inspection program.
That's right. yeah.
So that's one piece. We also supported the EAC's recommendation on carbon shadow pricing for borough purchases above 11,500, so that the borough can make well-informed choices, you know, when comparing, say, a combustion engine vehicle to an electric vehicle. And, you know, for the time being, the concept is just to have, you know, be able to compare apples and apples. So it would inform decision-making. And then in a year or so, we could revisit it and see if we actually want to set up a green fund. Okay, we also are moving forward with the snow routes so that the ordinance will match the signage.
What a concept.
And let's see, what else? We've been discussing with Chief Gallagher the traffic complaints and the traffic review process, and we're waiting on some of the equipment to be repaired, the traffic counting equipment. So that's holding up our review process of the traffic complaints. Is there anything else?
It was put into practice and then they found out it wasn't working. They thought it was working, but when they went to put it into practice, it wasn't. And they went back and forth with the company trying to get it fixed, and the company's like, you've got to send it back.
Yeah, so I think that's most of it. We always run out of time at our meeting, so we're going to start with Dave Berto and the 500 block of Dudley at our next meeting.
Okay, great. Parking, which, if we get into our future agendas, is an ad hoc committee that has been created. And Councilor Fortner?
Yes. We met on October 26th. We're going to meet again on November 9th. The committee is working to craft a comprehensive program for the borough that reflects the fact that our streets are a valuable resource for everyone. And so the public streets and the public parking lots. So we're working towards something that we hope will be a good starting point for our discussion on where we want to go.
Is there any discussion of timeline of how long it might take the committee to complete its work?
No, but you can interpret from the fact that we are only meeting 2 weeks apart that we are not taking this lightly. We feel like we've got some momentum and we want to keep that going.
So is that everything? Is that everything for the committee?
Yes.
So then I'll segue right into announcements, which is parking affects all of us. It is right in front of your house on all of the streets of the borough, and this committee is moving quickly and aggressively to come to council with a plan that can be adopted. And it is, I believe they will come with a plan that is very positive for balancing this sort of public resource, but it will most likely involve a change to what you consider to be the status quo. So I encourage community members to come to the parking committee and use that opportunity in a public meeting to share their thoughts, because this time is going to go quickly. Any other announcements? All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
Seconded, all in favor? Aye, we will go into executive session to discuss personnel and property acquisition matters. We will not be returning to public session.
I'll save it.
We will take a 5-minute break.